desperate mother, a captured child, and a Comanche chief who sees something no one else does. What happens in the next moments will change every life in that camp forever. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The harsh wind swept across the plains of the Texas Territory, carrying with it the scent of sage and dust. The year was 1852, and the frontier was as beautiful as it was dangerous. Sarah Miller clutched her 5-year-old daughter Emma tightly as their wagon train made its way west. They had been traveling for weeks, leaving behind the comforts of St. Louis after Sarah had lost her husband to typhoid fever. The promise of a new beginning with her brother's family in California was all that kept her going. "Mama, I'm thirsty," Emma whispered, her small voice barely audible over the creaking of the wagon wheels. Sarah reached for the canteen, rationing what little water remained. "Just a small sip, darling. We'll reach the river by nightfall." The wagon master, Mr. Barton, had assured them they would find a suitable place to camp with fresh water before dusk. Sarah trusted his judgment, though she had noticed his increasingly worried glances toward the horizon. The Comanche territory was not to be taken lightly, and rumors of raids had put everyone on edge. As the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, Sarah noticed a cloud of dust in the distance. At first, she thought it might be a storm brewing, but Mr. Barton's shout shattered that hope. "Indians! Everyone, circle the wagons!" Panic erupted among the travelers. Men scrambled for rifles while women gathered children. Sarah froze momentarily before instinct took over. She pulled Emma down from their perch and hurried her inside the canvas-covered wagon. "Stay here and don't make a sound," she instructed, pressing a finger to her lips. Emma's blue eyes widened with fear, but she nodded obediently. The thundering of hooves grew louder, drowning out the shouted commands of Mr. Barton. Sarah peered through a small tear in the canvas and saw them. Comanche warriors, at least 20 strong, their faces painted for battle, riding in perfect formation toward the vulnerable wagon train. The first shots rang out from the settlers, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Sarah watched in horror as one by one, the men fell. Women screamed, children cried, and the air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and blood. When 2 warriors approached her wagon, Sarah grabbed the small pistol her late husband had insisted she learn to use. Her hands shook, but her resolve was firm. She would protect Emma at all costs. The canvas was ripped away, and Sarah found herself face to face with a young warrior. Without hesitation, she fired. The shot went wide, and before she could cock the hammer again, the warrior had leaped into the wagon and knocked the weapon from her hand. "Run, Emma!" Sarah screamed as she struggled against her attacker. Emma darted from the wagon, but another warrior quickly caught the child, hoisting her onto his horse. Sarah fought with the desperation of a mother bear, clawing and biting until a blow to her head sent her world spinning into darkness. When she awoke, the sun was setting, casting an eerily beautiful orange glow over a scene of absolute devastation. The wagons had been ransacked, bodies lay scattered, and smoke rose from several small fires. Sarah called out for Emma, her voice breaking with each cry, but received no response. A sound behind her made her turn. A surviving settler, badly wounded, crawled toward her. "They took the women and children," he gasped. "The Comanche took them north." Sarah's world collapsed around her. "Emma," she whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "My Emma." With trembling legs, she stood and surveyed the carnage. The Comanche had taken supplies, horses, and captives, but had left a few mounts behind. Making a decision that would alter the course of her life, Sarah gathered what supplies she could salvage, mounted one of the remaining horses, and set off in the direction the warriors had gone. "I'm coming for you, Emma," she vowed to the wind. "I won't stop until I find you." As night fell over the plains, Sarah pushed forward, guided only by maternal instinct and the faint trail left by the war party. She knew the stories of white captives, knew the fates that often befell them, but refused to believe such a fate awaited her sweet Emma. The thought of her child, frightened and alone among strangers, spurred Sarah onward despite her own fear and exhaustion. The vast star-filled sky offered little comfort as Sarah rode through the darkness. her determination overshadowing the voice of reason that told her pursuing a Comanche war party alone was suicide. But what choice did she have? Every moment that passed was another moment Emma spent in captivity, another opportunity for harm to come to her child. "I promised your father I would keep you safe," Sarah whispered, the words carried away by the night wind. "And I intend to honor that promise, no matter what it takes." 3 days had passed since Sarah began tracking the Comanche war party. Her supplies were dwindling, and exhaustion tugged at her every movement, but determination kept her moving forward. The trail had led her deeper into Comanche territory, a place few white settlers ever ventured willingly. As dawn broke on the 4th day, Sarah spotted smoke rising in the distance. Cautiously, she approached on foot, leaving her horse tethered behind a cluster of rocks. Crawling to the edge of a bluff, she gazed down at a Comanche encampment nestled in a sheltered valley. Dozens of teepees formed a semicircle around a central fire, with warriors, women, and children going about their morning activities. Sarah's heart raced as she scanned the camp, desperately seeking any sign of Emma or the other captives. Then she saw them, a group of women and children, clearly from the wagon train, gathered under guard near the center of the camp, and among them, her golden-haired Emma, clutching a small rag doll she had managed to keep with her. Relief washed over Sarah, followed quickly by renewed determination. Emma was alive, but how could one woman possibly rescue her child from an entire Comanche village? Sarah retreated from the bluff to think. She would need to observe, to learn the patterns of the camp, to find a moment when Emma might be less heavily guarded. For 2 days, Sarah watched from different vantage points, noting when guards changed and when the camp was most active or quiet. She noticed that the captives were kept together, but Emma seemed to be treated with particular interest by several of the Comanche women. The child's bright blonde hair and blue eyes made her an object of fascination. On the evening of the 2nd day, as Sarah observed from a hidden position closer to the camp, she witnessed something that made her blood run cold. A warrior approached the captives, pointing directly at Emma. The other captive women formed a protective circle around the child, but were shoved aside. Without thinking, Sarah emerged from her hiding place and ran toward the camp, heedless of the danger. She had barely reached the edge of the encampment when she was spotted. Warriors quickly surrounded her. Spears and knives pointed at her heart, but Sarah's eyes remained fixed on Emma. "Mama!" Emma cried out, trying to run to her mother but held back by a Comanche woman. "Please!" Sarah begged the warriors surrounding her, knowing they likely couldn't understand her words but hoping they would sense her desperation. "She's my daughter. Don't hurt her." The warriors seized Sarah, binding her wrists with rawhide. They led her to the center of the camp, where the other captives watched with a mixture of surprise and renewed fear. As Sarah was pushed to her knees before what appeared to be the camp's leadership, whispers rippled through the gathered Comanche. An older warrior stepped forward, studying Sarah with intense dark eyes. His face was lined with age and experience, his long black hair streaked with silver. By his bearing and the respect shown to him by the others, Sarah guessed he held a position of authority. He spoke to her in Comanche, gesturing toward Emma. When Sarah shook her head, unable to understand, he tried broken English. "You come for small one?" "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "She's my daughter." The older warrior turned to a younger man beside him, one whose elaborate headdress and decorated shield marked him as someone of significance. This younger man, tall, powerfully built with a stern countenance, stepped forward to inspect Sarah more closely. His dark eyes seemed to pierce through her, assessing her worth, her threat, her very soul. This, Sarah realized with a chill, must be the chief of this band. His presence commanded attention, and even the seasoned warriors seemed to defer to him. He couldn't have been more than 30 summers old, but authority sat upon his shoulders like a mantle. He spoke sharply in Comanche, and Sarah was roughly pulled to her feet. The chief circled her slowly, his expression unreadable. Sarah stood as tall as her exhausted frame would allow, meeting his gaze whenever it fell upon her. "I am Rising Wolf," he finally said in accented but clear English, surprising Sarah. "You brave woman, foolish but brave." "I want my daughter," Sarah replied, glancing toward Emma, who watched the exchange with wide, frightened eyes. Rising Wolf followed her gaze. Golden hair. He nodded toward Emma. Special child, bring good fortune to tribe. Fear clutched at Sarah's heart. She had heard stories of native tribes adopting white children, raising them as their own until they forgot their previous lives. The thought of Emma forgetting her, forgetting their life together, was unbearable. Please, Sarah whispered. She's all I have. Rising Wolf studied her for a long moment before speaking again. You stay. Child, stay. You serve tribe. Maybe one day. He left the sentence unfinished, but Sarah understood the implication. There was no guarantee she would ever be allowed to leave with Emma, but at least they would be together. That night, Sarah was reunited with Emma in a small teepee where the other captive women were kept. Emma flung herself into her mother's arms, sobbing with relief. I knew you'd come, Mama, Emma whispered. I told them my mama would find me. Sarah held her daughter close, stroking her tangled blonde hair. I'll always find you, my love. Always. The other captive women gathered around, their faces showing both happiness for the reunion and concern for what the future held. An older woman named Martha, who had been on the wagon train, explained what she had learned of their situation. The young ones and those of childbearing age will be adopted into the tribe, Martha said quietly. The rest, she trailed off, but Sarah could fill in the unspoken fate. We need to escape, Sarah whispered, mindful of the guard posted outside their teepee. All of us. Martha shook her head sadly. They watch us too closely. And where would we go? We're deep in their territory now. Sarah fell silent, knowing Martha spoke the truth. For now, survival and keeping Emma close were her priorities. She would watch, wait, and plan. Somehow, someday, they would find their way back to freedom. As days turned into weeks, Sarah and Emma settled into a routine within the Comanche camp. Sarah was put to work with the other captive women, tanning hides, preparing food, and performing various tasks. Emma, to Sarah's relief, was allowed to stay with her during the day, though the Comanche women often came to admire the child's fair features. Sarah noticed that Rising Wolf frequently observed them from a distance, his expression thoughtful. Once, when a warrior had been rough with Sarah, the chief had intervened with a sharp command that had sent the offender slinking away. Sarah wasn't sure what to make of this apparent protection, but she was grateful for anything that improved their chances of survival. One evening, as Sarah sat outside their teepee mending a torn garment, Rising Wolf approached and sat beside her. Emma had already fallen asleep inside, exhausted from a day of playing with the Comanche children who had gradually accepted her into their games. Your hands work well, Rising Wolf commented, nodding at Sarah's neat stitches. Thank you, Sarah replied cautiously, never certain of his intentions. Your daughter learns our ways quickly, he continued. Soon she speak Comanche better than English. Sarah's hands stilled. She will never forget who she is. Rising Wolf's expression remained impassive, but Sarah thought she detected a glimmer of respect in his dark eyes. Who she is changes. Who you are changes. This is way of life. As he rose to leave, Sarah gathered her courage. Why did you attack our wagon train? We meant no harm, we were just passing through. Rising Wolf looked down at her, his face hardening. White men bring disease. White men kill buffalo. White men take land. We protect what is ours. Before Sarah could respond, he walked away, leaving her with troubling thoughts about the conflict between their peoples, a conflict into which she and Emma had been unwittingly drawn. The seasons turned, and autumn painted the plains in hues of gold and russet. Sarah had been in the Comanche camp for nearly 3 months, long enough to learn basic words and phrases in their language and to understand some of their customs. Emma, with the adaptability of childhood, had embraced many aspects of Comanche life, playing with the tribal children and picking up their language far more quickly than her mother. Sarah's relationship with Rising Wolf had evolved into something she couldn't quite define. He sought her out regularly, asking her about the ways of her people, sometimes sharing stories of his own. She learned that he had been educated briefly at a mission school as a boy, which explained his facility with English. He had risen to leadership young, after proving himself in battle against both rival tribes and white settlers. One crisp morning, as Sarah worked outside the women's teepee, a commotion at the edge of the camp drew her attention. A group of warriors returned from what appeared to be a hunting expedition, but their grim faces suggested something had gone wrong. Rising Wolf met them, listening intently to their report before his gaze swept across the camp and landed on Sarah. Later that day, he summoned her to his teepee. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant with cedar smoke. Rising Wolf sat cross-legged before a small fire, his face solemn in the flickering light. "Your people come," he said without preamble. "Soldiers, many soldiers." Sarah's heart leaped with hope, even as apprehension filled her. "How far?" 2 days' ride. They burn villages. Kill our people." His voice remained steady, but Sarah could see the anger burning in his eyes. "Not all white men are the same," Sarah said cautiously, "just as not all Comanche are the same." Rising Wolf studied her face. "You wish to return to your people." It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway. "I wish for my daughter to be safe. I wish for no more bloodshed." "There will be battle," Rising Wolf stated flatly, "unless we move camp. Go north, into the mountains." Sarah took a deep breath. "And us? The captives?" Rising Wolf's expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. "Some say kill captives. Leave no burden." Fear gripped Sarah's heart, but she forced herself to remain calm. "And what do you say?" For a long moment, Rising Wolf was silent, the only sound the soft crackling of the fire between them. Finally, he spoke. "I say you are under my protection. You and Golden Hair." Relief washed over Sarah, though she was careful not to show it too plainly. "And the others?" "They come too," Rising Wolf conceded. "But you—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "You have courage of Comanche woman. You understand our ways now." Sarah wasn't sure how to respond to what seemed almost like praise. Before she could formulate a reply, Rising Wolf continued. "Tomorrow we break camp. Long journey ahead. Many dangers." Sarah nodded her understanding. "Thank you for your protection." As she turned to leave, Rising Wolf spoke again. "Sarah." It was the first time he had used her name. "In another life, you would make good Comanche wife." The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning Sarah wasn't ready to examine. She inclined her head slightly and slipped out of the teepee, her mind racing with the implications of everything she had learned. The camp was a flurry of activity the next morning as the Comanche prepared to move north. Tipis were dismantled, belongings packed onto travois, and horses readied for the journey. Sarah helped the other captive women with their assigned tasks, all while keeping Emma close. "Where are we going, Mama?" Emma asked as she watched the busy preparations. "To the mountains," Sarah replied, adjusting the leather tunic Emma now wore instead of her tattered dress. "It will be an adventure." Emma nodded solemnly. "Will Rising Wolf lead us?" "He says I'm brave like you." Sarah's hand stilled. "When did he tell you that?" "When he brought me this." Emma pulled a small carved wooden horse from the pouch at her waist. "He said brave girls should have brave horses." Sarah examined the carving, touched by the unexpected kindness. The figure was beautifully crafted, clearly made by skilled hands. "It's lovely, Emma. Did you thank him?" "Yes, Mama. In Comanche." Emma beamed proudly. By midday, the camp was on the move. A long procession of people, horses, and dogs heading north toward the distant mountains. Rising Wolf rode at the front, occasionally dropping back to check on different parts of the column. Whenever he passed near Sarah and Emma, his gaze lingered, and once he stopped to ensure they had enough water for the journey. The first day of travel passed without incident, but as they made camp that evening, Sarah overheard worried conversations among the warriors. Even with her limited understanding of Comanche, she could tell they feared the soldiers were following their trail. Her suspicions were confirmed when Rising Wolf approached her as she prepared Emma for sleep. "Soldiers follow," he said quietly. "Move faster tomorrow." Sarah nodded, then hesitated before asking, "If they catch us, what will happen?" Rising Wolf's expression darkened. "For us, death. For you," he shrugged, "return to your people. If they don't shoot you first, thinking you Comanche now." The stark reality of their situation settled over Sarah. After months among the Comanche, wearing their clothing and learning their ways, would the soldiers even recognize her as white? Would they listen before they fired? And what of the other captives? "There must be a way to prevent bloodshed," Sarah said, almost to herself. Rising Wolf watched her curiously. You care what happens to Comanche? Sarah met his gaze steadily. I care what happens to people. All people. Something shifted in Rising Wolf's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. He reached out, hesitated, then lightly touched Sarah's cheek with calloused fingers. Sleep now, he said softly. Tomorrow, long journey. As he walked away, Sarah realized her heart was beating faster, and not entirely from fear. Confused by her reaction, she turned her attention back to settling Emma for the night, pushing all other thoughts aside. The second day of travel was harder, the pace punishing as the band pushed deeper into rougher terrain. By late afternoon, even the hardiest warriors showed signs of fatigue, and the women and children struggled to keep up. When they finally stopped to make camp in a sheltered valley, Sarah was helping Emma drink from a water skin when shouts of alarm rang out. Warriors rushed to defensive positions, women gathered children, and within moments, chaos erupted. Soldiers on horseback appeared at the valley's entrance, their rifles already firing into the Comanche ranks. The ambush had been perfectly executed, catching the band as they were most vulnerable. Emma, run! Sarah pushed her daughter toward the cover of nearby boulders, shielding the child with her own body as bullets whizzed overhead. They had nearly reached safety when Sarah heard a cry of pain nearby. She turned to see a Comanche woman fallen, blood staining her buckskin dress, her young son standing frozen beside her. Without hesitation, Sarah darted from cover, grabbed the boy, and pulled him with them behind the boulders. The child couldn't have been more than 4, his dark eyes wide with terror. Stay here, Sarah instructed both children. Don't move until I come back. Emma clutched the Comanche boy's hand. Be careful, Mama. Sarah crept back to the wounded woman, staying low to avoid the bullets still flying overhead. The woman's breathing was labored, her eyes glazed with pain and fear. Help you, Sarah said in broken Comanche, examining the wound in the woman's shoulder. It was bleeding heavily, but didn't appear fatal if treated quickly. Using strips torn from her own garment, Sarah bound the wound as best she could, then helped the woman to her feet. Together they stumbled toward the relative safety of the boulders where the children waited. As they moved, Sarah became aware of a mounted figure charging toward them through the smoke and confusion of battle. Her heart lurched with terror until she recognized Rising Wolf, his face streaked with war paint, his expression fierce with concern. He leaped from his horse beside them, speaking rapidly to the wounded woman. His sister, Sarah realized from their interaction. With careful strength, he lifted her onto his horse, then turned to Sarah. Children, he asked urgently. Safe. Sarah pointed to the boulders. There. Rising Wolf nodded once, then made a decision. Take horse, take children, ride north. He pointed toward a narrow pass through the hills. We follow when we can. I can't leave, Sarah began, but Rising Wolf cut her off. Must save children, he insisted. Save yourself. Go now. A bullet struck the ground near their feet, emphasizing his words. Rising Wolf helped his sister from the horse, supporting her weight as Sarah mounted. Together they retrieved Emma and the Comanche boy from behind the boulders, lifting them up to sit before Sarah on the horse. North, Rising Wolf repeated, pointing again to the pass. Creek follows path. Water, shelter. He reached up, his hand closing briefly around Sarah's. Be safe. Before Sarah could respond, he slapped the horse's flank, sending them galloping away from the battle. Sarah leaned low over the children, protecting them as best she could while guiding the horse toward the distant pass. As they crested a small rise, Sarah couldn't help looking back. The valley below was filled with smoke and the sounds of battle, the outcome uncertain. Somewhere in that chaos was Rising Wolf, fighting not just for his own life, but for the survival of his people. With a heavy heart, Sarah turned the horse northward again, her thoughts divided between the immediate need to protect the children in her care and concern for those they had left behind, particularly the Comanche chief who had somehow, against all odds, earned her respect and perhaps something more. Will they be all right, Mama? Emma asked, her voice small against the wind. Sarah wished she could offer certainty. Rising Wolf is strong and clever, she said instead. We must be strong too, and find safe shelter before nightfall. As they rode toward the mountain pass, Sarah silently prayed for those they had left behind. surprised to find herself including the Comanche in those prayers with the same fervor she reserved for the other captives. Somewhere along the way, the clear divisions between her people and them had blurred, leaving her uncertain where she truly belonged. 3 days had passed since Sarah fled the battlefield with the children. Following Rising Wolf's directions, they had found the creek and followed it deeper into the mountains, eventually discovering a small cave that provided shelter from the increasingly cold nights. The Comanche boy, whose name Sarah learned was Little Fox, had gradually warmed to them, though he still occasionally asked for his mother in his native tongue. Sarah had managed to trap small game and gather edible plants, skills she had observed during her months with the Comanche. Emma had appointed herself Little Fox's protector, teaching him English words while he taught her Comanche ones. Their resilience amazed Sarah, even as she worried about their future. On the morning of the 4th day, Sarah was showing the children how to identify animal tracks when she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats. Immediately on alert, she hurried the children back to the cave, instructing them to remain hidden while she investigated. Concealing herself behind a large boulder, Sarah watched the approaching riders with a mixture of hope and dread. As they drew nearer, she recognized the distinctive Comanche riding style and felt her heart leap. Among the small party of warriors, riding tall and proud at their head, was Rising Wolf. Sarah emerged from hiding, waving to attract their attention. Rising Wolf spotted her immediately, spurring his horse forward while the other warriors maintained a watchful perimeter. He dismounted in a fluid motion and strode toward her, his face revealing relief before returning to its customary stoicism. "You are safe," he said, his eyes scanning her for injury. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "The children, too. How did you find us?" "Followed your trail," Rising Wolf replied with a hint of pride. "Not easy. You hide tracks well now." Sarah felt an unexpected flush of pleasure at the compliment. "The battle? The others?" Rising Wolf's expression darkened. "Many lost. Soldiers retreat after we fight hard. Little Fox's mother lives but wounded. She asks for her son. He's well," Sarah assured him. "Emma has been caring for him like a brother." Something softened in Rising Wolf's gaze. "Golden hair has good heart, like her mother." Sarah called to the children who emerged cautiously from the cave. Little Fox gave a cry of joy when he saw the warriors and ran to them, chattering excitedly in Comanche. Emma approached more slowly, staying close to Sarah's side. "Are we going back to the camp?" Emma asked, looking up at Rising Wolf with curious eyes. Rising Wolf crouched to her level. "No camp now. We join other Comanche bands. Go further north." He straightened and turned to Sarah. "You come with us?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Sarah hesitated, torn between the pull toward what remained of her old life and the connections formed during her time among the Comanche. "The other captives?" she asked. "Some escaped in battle, some—" Rising Wolf looked away briefly. "Some did not survive." Sarah closed her eyes, grief washing over her for the women she had come to know. When she opened them again, Rising Wolf was watching her intently. "There is trading post 2 days' ride west," he said quietly. "I can take you there. You return to your people." It was the offer of freedom she had dreamed of for months, yet now that it was presented, Sarah found herself strangely reluctant. "I need time to think," she said finally. Rising Wolf nodded once. "We rest here tonight. Decide tomorrow." As the warriors set up a small camp, Sarah observed how naturally Emma interacted with them, how the child had adapted to a life so different from the one they had known. She wondered what awaited them if they returned to white society. Would they ever truly belong again after what they had experienced? That evening, as the children slept and the warriors kept watch, Rising Wolf joined Sarah by the small fire outside the cave. "Why did you protect us?" Sarah asked the question that had lingered in her mind. "You could have killed us with the others from the wagon train." Rising Wolf was silent for a long moment, gazing into the flames. "When warriors attack wagon, I see you fight for your child, like she-wolf protects cubs." He looked up, meeting Sarah's eyes. "I respect courage, even in enemy." "Am I still your enemy?" Sarah asked softly. Rising Wolf studied her face in the flickering firelight. "No longer enemy," he finally said. "But what you are to me—" He trailed off, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. Sarah's heart quickened. "What am I?" Instead of answering directly, Rising Wolf reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. When she remained still, he gently traced the line of her cheek with his fingertips. "You are woman of two worlds now," he said. "Not fully white, not Comanche, but something new." Sarah couldn't deny the truth of his words. She had changed, adapted, learned. The woman who had left St. Louis with her daughter was not the same woman who sat beside a Comanche chief under the vast western sky. "And Emma?" she asked. "What future would she have among your people?" "Respected," Rising Wolf replied without hesitation. "Protected. Taught our ways, but never forced to forget her mother's ways. And at the trading post? What future for us there?" Rising Wolf's expression grew somber. "Some white men accept you again. Others," he made a gesture of rejection, "see you as tainted by Comanche, treat you as outcast." Sarah had feared as much. Stories of returned captives being shunned by their own communities were not uncommon. After all they had endured, the thought of facing further rejection was almost unbearable. "There is third path," Rising Wolf said, his voice low but steady. "Stay with me, not as captive, as wife." The unexpected proposal left Sarah speechless. She searched his face for any sign of insincerity, but found only earnest intensity. "Why would you want me as your wife?" she finally managed to ask. Rising Wolf's answer was simple and direct. "You have strength I admire, wisdom I respect, heart I—" He paused, perhaps searching for the right word in English. "Heart I cherish." Sarah's own heart raced at his confession. Against all odds, against the backdrop of conflict between their peoples, something profound had grown between them, a connection forged through shared hardship and mutual respect. "I need time," she said again, though her voice wavered slightly. Rising Wolf nodded. "Until morning." At dawn, Sarah stood at the edge of the creek, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in gold and pink. She had spent much of the night in thought, weighing choices, considering futures, not just for herself, but for Emma. When she heard footsteps approach, she knew without turning that it was Rising Wolf. "I've made my decision," she said, facing him at last. His expression remained neutral, though tension showed in the set of his shoulders. "Tell me, if I return to the trading post, Emma and I face uncertainty, perhaps rejection." Sarah took a deep breath. "If we stay with you, we face different challenges, but we would have a place, a purpose." Hope flickered in Rising Wolf's dark eyes. "You stay, on one condition," Sarah said firmly, "that you work for peace between our peoples whenever possible, that Emma learns the best of both worlds." Rising Wolf considered her words carefully before responding. "I cannot promise peace always. Too much blood spilled on both sides." He stepped closer. "But I can promise to seek path of peace when possible, to teach others that not all white people are enemies. As you teach your daughter not all Comanche are savages." It was as much as Sarah could reasonably ask, perhaps more than she had expected. "Then yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with certainty. "Emma and I will stay with you." Relief and joy transformed Rising Wolf's usually stoic features. He reached for her hands, enfolding them in his own. "You will not regret this choice. I will honor you as my wife, protect your daughter as my own." "Our daughter," Sarah corrected gently. "If I am to be your wife, then Emma becomes our child." Rising Wolf's smile deepened. "Our daughter," he agreed. "First of two peoples in our band. Perhaps others will follow this new path." Sarah knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be prejudice to overcome, traditions to navigate, a delicate balance to maintain. But standing there with Rising Wolf, feeling the genuine affection in his touch and seeing the respect in his eyes, she believed they might succeed. When they returned to camp, Emma was already awake, helping one of the warriors prepare a morning meal. She looked up as they approached, her keen eyes noting their clasped hands. "Mama?" she questioned, her expression curious rather than concerned. Sarah knelt beside her daughter. "Emma, Rising Wolf has asked us to stay with him and his people, not as captives but as family. What do you think about that?" Emma looked thoughtfully between them. "Will I still be allowed to ride horses and learn to make things from leather?" "Yes," Rising Wolf answered solemnly. "And I will teach you to read the stars, to know the language of the wind and rain. Emma nodded as if this settled everything. I like it here, she declared, and little Fox needs someone to teach him English words. Sarah exchanged a look with Rising Wolf, both amused and touched by the child's simple acceptance. Later that day, as they prepared to join the main band of Comanche further north, Rising Wolf presented Sarah with a gift, a beautifully beaded necklace that had belonged to his mother. For my wife, he said, placing it around her neck with gentle hands. Symbol of new beginning. Sarah touched the intricate beadwork, moved by the significance of the gesture. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing me as I am, not as you expected me to be. Rising Wolf brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. We see each other true, he replied. This is rare gift between any people. As they rode north together, Sarah reflected on the strange, unpredictable path that had led her here. What had begun in tragedy, the loss of her husband, the attack on the wagon train, her captivity, had somehow transformed into something she never could have imagined. A new family, a new purpose, a bridge between worlds. Emma rode beside them on her own small pony, chatting happily with little Fox, who would soon be reunited with his mother. The child had adapted with remarkable resilience, finding joy even in circumstances most adults would consider impossible. Perhaps, Sarah thought, they could all learn something from Emma's example. Perhaps the future didn't have to be defined by the conflicts of the past. Perhaps, with courage and open hearts, new paths could be forged through even the most difficult terrain. As the mountains rose before them, majestic and enduring, Sarah felt Rising Wolf's gaze upon her. She turned to meet it, no longer afraid of what she might find there. No regrets? He asked quietly. Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her for the first time in many months. No regrets, she confirmed. Only hope for what lies ahead. Rising Wolf reached across the space between their horses and took her hand, his grip strong and sure. Together they rode toward their future, not as captive and captor, not as enemies, but as partners in a new and unexpected journey. Behind them, the rising sun cast their shadows far across the plains, two figures becoming one in the golden morning light.